the first two seasons of Attack on Titan finished, the story is starting to really take shape, and we're finally starting to close in on some answers to this whole thing. And after the reveals of the last season, the third act of Attack on Titan takes the form of internal conflict within the walls in the first part. As it turns out, the government and nobles want their hands on Eren's power and Historia for some reason. So now the scouts are more busy fighting enemies inside the walls and killing titans. But this grappling with internal affairs is what really starts to get us up to speed with the overall mystery of the series and what is actually happening behind the fog of missing information. The highlight of this season is the progression of the overall story that gets us to finally understand what's going on in this world. While there didn't seem to be a whole lot of details about things going on outside the walls in the first two seasons, there was tons of information about that in this one, as well as the introduction to the founding myth of the world. Now, it still leaves quite a bit to be explained, but we can see past all the lies and the fog. The nature of the conflict in this world being fully revealed to us as one between warring human nations rather than a battle for survival against the Titans changes the entire setting, flipping it on its head in fact. The story actually feels like it's headed towards a clear conclusion now. In previous seasons, the end goal seemed rather ambiguous, which I actually say was part of the fun of it. And Season 3 appropriately moves the series into the final stages of its story. Nothing feels rushed. It's developed at a pace that feels natural, and what time skips it gives us are well earned and aptly placed to gloss over large spans of time that don't mean much. So far, this story has been nothing but awesome nearly the entire way through, with one hiccup that I feel needs to be mentioned. Season 3 shifts the story away from the battle against the Titans and over to a battle against other human factions. The beginning of the season feels a bit off for a couple of episodes because of this. I found myself less interested in the opening of Season 3, but as I approached the midway point and they continued to build the world and fill out the missing pieces of the puzzle, it got so much better. And don't get me wrong, those ODM sequences from the first few episodes with the scouts doing battle against the anti-personnel control unit were gorgeous. In fact, I think this season had some of the best ODM scenes in the series because Levi puts in some work. But splitting the season into two cores gives me a good point at which to cover the story. Core 1 deals with the nature of the walls, the power of the king within the walls, and the power of the Titan shifters like Eren. This part, as I said, starts out a little weird because it's a human-on-human battle that feels like a bit of a deviation from the overall story. But it ties back in excellently with humanity's battle against the Titans as it begins to explain that most of what the people within the walls held to be true was an utter fabrication. This is handled with almost all the excellence in writing that Isayama has demonstrated up to this point. The one thing, in spite of it being necessary for the plot to move forward, that actually did grate on my nerves is the constant damsel in distress treatment of Eren Yeager. I think this season was like the third save Eren moment the plot has put on us, and I just wasn't feeling it this time around. But other than that, exposition and dialogue isn't overly preachy or revealing. It doesn't dump information on you just for the sake of getting it out there, and it really uses clever mechanics to dredge up stories of the past and the true nature of the world. Now, since Core 1 dealt with the world within the walls, Core 2 introduces the world outside the walls, one rife with hatred and conflict. It also gives us the first hint at the founding myth of the series, the tale of how Ymir became the first Titan by making a deal with the devil. One thing I love in storytelling is the exploration of these founding myths. Even just having one gives the story an air of completion and competence in my eyes, reminiscent of the best experiences I've had in fiction. So while we only get introduced to the concept of the first Titan, it's still a tantalizing prospect and one that adds more intrigue into the world. And then we come to one of the most intense battles in the series with the battle to retake Shiganshina. There, the scouts come face to face with not only the armored and colossal Titan, but the Beast Titan and another shifter as well. One thing I can say right now about Attack on Titan as a whole is that it has always felt as though it has had stakes in every part. And I get that feeling the most during this conflict. It's clear and believable that the scouts are at a massive disadvantage, and rather than using some miracle to push through, it uses strategy, planning, and wit in order to resolve the whole thing in a spectacularly tragic victory. It's also a bit hard to watch, because neither side really feels like they're the bad guy, even in the face of everything that the armored and colossal titans were responsible for. What Isayama's done with his world is incredible. It isn't convoluted and it isn't poorly explained. It has depth and history that make it come alive the more you learn about it. And his inbuilt mystery to everything that's happening makes the story feel less like it's just reacting to random events, and more like it's following a path and that the characters are properly driving the course of its history. It enriches the nature of conflict with moments that make you think. It forces you to question your own assumptions about who's good and evil. And in that regard, I think it truly captures the nature of war. Now, there are 3 characters I want to highlight in this season. Not that they're the only ones worth mentioning, or that they're the only ones who get any development, but they're the ones whose stories I found the most intriguing. Firstly is one of the most important figures for the first cour, Historia Rice. Formerly Krista Lentz, Historia is placed front and center as the true heir to the throne, and that makes her a very prominent target as the government wants her royal blood for some nefarious purpose. Before, she was a timid side character who felt like she was just there for some random cutesy moments. But this season she undergoes a dramatic change and actually takes control of her own fate. Watching weak or timid characters develop into more bold or hardened ones is a satisfying thing. It's ultimately a reflection of maturity and will, and with everything Historia's been through, it changes her for the better. You watch her go from someone who's just trying to find a hill to die on to taking up a very important role as queen. I liked her overall character arc of deciding to take her fate into her own hands and to choose what she wants, even if in the end things aren't how she had hoped they would be. It faced her with hard choices and the domineering wills of many of the powerful figures around her, but she never lost that gentleness in her nature, proved by her first action as queen by rounding up all the orphans and giving them a proper home. I'm going to make the argument that this is a well-done, strong female character, one who uses her power and position rather than just brute strength. She retains femininity in many regards, but still manages to be strong-willed and confident, to the point of not letting her father push her around any longer. Balance. Historia strikes the balance needed for the archetype to work. The next character to highlight is, of course, my favorite in the whole series, Erwin Smith. That incredible speech before charging the Beast Titan aside, we saw the full depth of Erwin's character this season before his tragic death. And true to form, he's perhaps my favorite kind of character, the one willing to take any action necessary in order to see to a goal. He isn't morally bankrupt. The sacrifices he makes aren't something he does on a whim. They haunt him. But he's willing to become a devil in the eyes of the world in order to accomplish what he wants. He's able to put his personal moral code aside and charge a straight line towards achievement. In that regard, he is ruthless, even to the point you could aptly call him a heartless bastard at times. But in the end, his actions were still to the benefit of a great many more people than he led to their deaths. And finally, we get to the Chad hero corruption arc. The slow change of Eren Yeager from an idealistic and bright-eyed young man to one looking at the world as nothing more than a bloodbath waiting to happen. The fact of the matter is that by the end of the season, Eren's motives have changed. It's no longer about saving humanity from the Titans. His goal has shifted to destroying his enemies. You can see it throughout the season as the weight of guilt over his father's actions and the pressure of the conflict he's been embroiled in start to take a toll on him. As he starts to realize the world isn't so cut and dry as he would have liked, his motivations come to question, and he's forced to confront some harsh realities. It's been noted up to this point, but now more than ever, Eren shows that he's motivated by hatred for his enemies more than anything. I think this season has become the tipping point for his character, and that he's quickly going to become the same kind of devil that Erwin was. All that said, this season holds out at 9 out of 10. There was yet again an issue with the Colossal Titan looking like its CGI was not the best it could have been, but everything else was rather spectacularly displayed. Music this season was weaker as well, with Red Swan being an intro I really love, but the second half of the season being an intro I didn't care for. That said, the story itself changed in a dramatic and well-executed way. It carries on in a spectacular fashion. It's still really well written, and I still find myself wholly engrossed in it. But that's enough out of me. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing because those simple but free actions do really help me. And if you have thoughts of your own to share, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I hope to see you all in the next one. Later.